Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Rachel and today I am going to be talking through how I went from drawing like this, which is a drawing that I did about 7 years ago, to this, which is a drawing that I finished this afternoon. So I'm just going to be talking through what I have learned in the last 7 years and some tips for you guys to improve on your drawing skills. So let's just do this.
So the three main points I'm going to be talking about today to improve your drawing are firstly composition, so making sure you have an accurate initial sketch. Shading, so using your pencils in a way that is going to give you the smoothest finish possible. And contrast, so using your lights and darks accurately and adding highlights and shadows in the right places. So for my initial sketch, I drew out a grid and measured out everything that way. And my initial sketch took me about 15 to 20 minutes. So some advice there is just to take your time there. It's so important. Don't jump the gun and just don't underestimate how much of a difference an accurate initial sketch is going to be. So I always start by shading the eye area, and I'm using a Faber-Castell HB pencil. This is just quite a light base for the shading, so it's not too dark yet, but that's what I'm going for. And I'm just using like a flattened side of my pencil, and I'm just using light strokes all in the same direction and just building that up over one another. So there are no sharp points to my pencil. I don't want anything to be distracting because this is going to be a really smooth texture for the skin. Just going in now with a blending stump to start shading some of those areas. If you don't know what a blending stump is, essentially it's just a sharpened piece of cardboard or paper material which you can use to blend pencil together. So now that I've got the base shadows in, I'm going in with a black Faber-Castell Polychromos pencil, and I'm using this to shade the black areas of the drawing. So that is the pupil and the eyelash line. So I'm just going in and darkening up those shadows again with my black pencil, and some more shading around the eyelid. Shadow to the whites of his eye. Contrary to popular belief, the whites of the eyes actually do have shadows in them, so that's quite an important part. Start adding some more detail to the eyebrows, and to do that I'm just using a very sharp pencil and pulling out each individual hair and taking my time with that. I'll just compare with my older drawing. Essentially the eyebrow was just one big dark worm looking thing. You didn't really see any highlights or shadows in there. There was no definition, so that is going to be so important and make such a huge difference to define those individual hairs. I'm continuing to shade the eye area. I'm not too worried yet about getting really dark shadows in. I'm just mainly focusing on making sure that is blended well and smoothly. Once I'm satisfied with that, I'm going to take my black pencil again and start really bringing out those darker areas, and just making sure between the really dark lines I'm leaving some light areas as well, some little hairs that just catch the sunlight, and just creating that illusion of highlights and shadows and there being light on the face. With that first drawing again, it's already looking tons better. From the composition and making sure those eyes are in the right place is a lot better, and the definition of each line, and there's actually some highlights in the eyebrow hairs and that lovely highlight in the eyeball which brings his eyes to life. So now I'm just working on shading in the nose, and again just making those little directional strokes all in the same direction and nice and lightly so that you can blend them together well, and just slowly bringing that shadow together. And here I'm using just a little tissue rather than the big blending stump for a larger flesh area. It's just a really gentle surface and a little cheap tool, to be honest, to just blend that pencil together, and you can see that the skin is already looking a lot smoother. Shade in a really dark shadow under the nose and just mapping out those creases in the cheeks as well. Pull out a couple of really nice white highlights in the nose, and I'm using a moldable eraser to do this. So this is a eraser that essentially you can mold into whatever shape you want and just gently pull away some of that graphite. It's a really handy tool. Just to point out, at this point in real time I've been working for about 45 minutes, so I'm really taking my time and making sure that the work that I'm putting into getting that shading really smooth is taking a lot of time, but it will really pay off in the end. Going again from the old drawing to the new one, already you can see there is a lot more tonal variation, so like contrast in this drawing at this point. Right around the nose you can see that used to be a very black, just like one, like black against white, and now you can see there's a lot more varying shades in there, so that is just so important. I'm just going to point out again with the shading on the cheeks there that each little stroke is going to be nice and even and nicely placed, so that when you blend it together there's not going to be any uneven patches. Moving on to the mouth now, I like to make sure that I've got the teeth right first, because the teeth are a really defining part of a person, so making sure you've got that right is so important. So I'm getting the dark shadows at the bottom of the teeth and never doing too many harsh lines right in between each teeth. I will do some shading right up the top where the gums are, but not too many right in the middle, because that's going to make them look really like scary and just like a grimace rather than a smile. So with the lips, I'm just going to start getting in the shadows there and leaving some of the highlights which are in the bottom lip mostly. And if you look at lips, they kind of have little cracks all the way down them and little shadows in between each crack. Define that more later, but I'm going to do the teeth for now. So just using my blending stump, not even a pencil yet, I'm adding some shadows inside the teeth, and sometimes you might feel like teeth should just be plain white, but to make them look really realistic and not too scary or flat, you've got to put some shadows in there. So that's what I'm doing now, and again shading in those little gums right at the top. A small area like each individual tooth, it can be hard to define those little areas, so you can use your little moldable eraser to pull out any white areas that you might have shaded in too dark. And now again, defining those little gaps and cracks in the lips with the pencil again, and pulling out those lighter shadows with an eraser as well, so you can see they're a lot more realistic now. So as I go along each little area, I just erase the guides that I've drawn, just so that I don't accidentally draw over them and have a big ugly line in between. Else I'll lightly touch on is showing you that I am shading in pretty much all of the skin. There isn't anywhere really, except for like a couple tiny highlights, where I haven't shaded in any skin. A lot of people just like to leave a lot of the skin white, but that does leave for quite a flat, not really realistic or deep drawing. Now that I've got a lot of the face shaded in, I don't want my hand to be smudging that detail that I've created, so I've just got a clear like plastic bag thing, and I'm using that and putting it over top of the drawing as like a barrier between the drawing and my hand, so I don't smudge anything. So that is something that you should do just to protect the beautiful drawing that you've already done. And you can use pretty much anything for this. just another sheet of paper would do the trick, and it's just going to make such a huge difference to you and your art. When I'm shading hair strokes, I like to use my hand really loosely and gesturally, so just pressing hard at one end and just flicking it out and just doing one stroke at a time. It's going to make such a huge difference. I'm just making sure I'm paying attention to the direction that this hair is moving in, so it goes up from the hairline and then there's some random hair that falls over top of that in a different direction, so that is so important to pay attention to. And already it's looking tons better than my first drawing back in the day. It's way more accurate to the photograph and there's a lot more tonal variation and soft shading in there. Moving on to the lower half of the face, I'm shading in the ear, and I'm not being too afraid to just go dark with my shadows in there. Getting that contrast really dark is going to make it look so much better in the long run. And I've got like a straight plain black jawline there. It's going to be like a massively dark shadow, so I'm just going for it and mapping that out. And for the jawline, like the lower half of the face, I'm getting my shadows in there and it's going to be a lot darker. As you can see, I'm starting to use a 6B pencil to start getting even darker shades in there. And adding this contrast is just going to make the drawing come off the page and look so much more realistic. And building up those layers of shading really slowly and gently has allowed me to get more of the face wrinkles and shapes and muscle structure a lot more accurate, as you can see in the chin and the smile lines and around the nose and that. Working on the hair, I tend to loosen up my hand a lot more, so hair it kind of flows really naturally and loosely, so you want your hand to be really unrestrained to be able to capture that. I'll start by pressing my pencil down hard in the darkest area and flicking it out really lightly at the end by like the middle light highlighted area of that hair. Back and forth with long, gentle, luxurious strokes. But the hair is going to be almost completely black, so for that reason, I mean, anyway you should, but for that reason mainly, you should be making sure that each little stroke in the lighter areas is really visible and you can see very defined hair so that you can get that really realistic look, even though there might be some really black flat areas. For the light areas, I'm always using my HB pencil, my light one, and then my black polychromos pencil for the black part of the hair, and my 6B pencil as well for the darker bits that aren't quite black. I'll often leave an area and then come back to it later on and add a lot more detail to it, like I'm doing with the eyebrows and that. Just seeing how the contrast is working, and then you can adjust it accordingly later on, so just be mindful of that. You can do whatever you want. In this photo overlaps and intertwines a lot, so I'm using my really dark pencil just to add a really stark contrast in those completely black areas to separate those areas. So now that I'm essentially finished with the face and hair, I'm working on the shadow by the jawline and really adding some crazy contrast in there. So just on the lower cheekbone here, I'm using my black pencil just to define right before the chin goes into the neck as a really dark space, and blending that out with a 6B pencil and the HB pencil. And beneath the chin is completely black, as is on the collar and behind the neck. So I'm just using my pencil on the side and just building up those shadows again the same way we did before, blending it out with a tissue and a blending stump if it's necessary. And another thing is to carry the shadow on from the chin. It also overlaps and carries on over the t-shirt, but obviously it's a different shade of grey, but it's still darker than the other side of the t-shirt. So just paying attention to how shadows work and interact. One of my final and favourite bits to do at the end of a drawing is to just add with a really sharp pencil the tiny little hairs around the hairline, because no hairdo, unless it's slicked back with like oil, ever has no hair out of place. So just pop those little lines in and it'll look so perfect. Comparison as I'm doing the final details. So composition wise, the final drawing in my opinion actually looks like Jack, so I've done everything in the right spot. It is 10 times smoother. The blending between light to dark is just really nice and smooth, and you can see next to no pencil strokes. Contrast wise, I think I've done a lot better here in saving my really dark darks rather than using them pretty much everywhere, so that when I do have a dark contrast like the cheekbone and the jawline, it really stands out and brings Jack off the page, which is what I want. So there you have it, 2 drawings of the exact same picture, just drawn 7 years apart.
Alright, awesome. So that is the end of today's video. Please, if you liked what you saw, please just give it a thumbs up, and if you like what you're seeing on my channel, subscribe, and I'll be putting out new videos at least once a week. Please just comment below any suggestions that you have, or if you just want to chat, I'm here, we can be friends, it's cool. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, it means the world to me. See you next time.